So before I developed PFS, I was a virgin. I'm still a virgin now, and that's extremely distressing because I'm now 21. It's been 2 years. Um, I go to university. Um, I'd like to be interacting with the girls, but there's always a block in my head saying, even if I do manage to make something happen, what's going to happen when we get sexual? What's going to happen on that front? Because I don't have a penis that's working correctly to do what I would like to do. Um, you add that on to whatever kind of confidence issues people have at this age. I walk around and I feel as though I'm inferior to other guys because I have to deal with this, and that there's essentially something wrong with me because there is.
Hello and welcome to the Moral Medicine channel. My name is Eric, and today I have the privilege of talking to Ethan, who is going to describe his experience with post-finasteride syndrome. Thank you so much for your courage speaking out, Ethan.
Yeah.
So, Ethan, why don't you start by just telling the audience a bit about your life before taking finasteride?
Sure. So before taking finasteride, 19-year-old guy, perfectly normal sexual functioning, no problems there, no problems with libido, no problems in my genitals and anything of the sort. And yeah, everything was fine. I had no issues. I'm perfectly healthy in that regard, completely.
Okay, and why don't you tell me a little bit about why you decided to take the drug and when did
Sure.
you decide to take it? Yeah.
So I first heard about so I imagine my story is the same as many people, except I was more on the younger side. So I was 19 at the time, and I noticed that my hairline was starting to recede. So I noticed that in the mirror, and I'm somebody who likes to take action as quickly as possible. So I did my research on finasteride, and I had come across some information about post-Finasteride syndrome, but what I really came across was most people trying to discredit it, saying that it didn't exist or whatever. So I bought into all that, and I went ahead and I tried as quickly as I could to find a means to get finasteride prescribed to myself. I ended up using an online Canadian service called Maple, and they were able to get me a prescription for finasteride, which I subsequently went to the pharmacy to pick up. And this was in May of 2021.
Okay. So, how was the drug prescribed to you exactly? What kind of safety information was presented to you?
Sure. Well, what I found odd was because I was so convinced that there was no possibility post-finasteride syndrome and that it was all made up, and this is what doctors maintain online, some of them and some other people, that when I actually went ahead to the online service, Maple, they had me check a box saying that if any side effects were to happen, they would not be liable. And which was very weird to me was there's even a section on um saying that they have no, just like how in Keeps, so Maple is the Canadian equivalent of Keeps pretty much. So they said something to the sort of, there's a certain people online who claim to have developed post-Finasteride syndrome. We just want you to be aware of this, and do you consent to any kind of side effects you may get while taking this? So I said yes, because I trusted a lot of the sources I heard online that it was not true, which is what is basically projected by Merck and all the rest. And I said, yeah, well, this is obviously, they're just doing this to legally protect themselves. And so I said, yeah, okay, no problem. And I had spoken to a doctor. It was very quick. All I really did, there wasn't even a video conference. I just sent them pictures of my hairline. They said, yep, no problem. Here's finasteride. It's as easy as that. I just paid for the consultation. It was extremely quick. There was no counseling on really going into depth in some of the side effects. It was just a couple things were listed, and that was that. And it was easy as can be. And then after that, I went ahead to my pharmacist, and this was again very weird. My pharmacist gave it to me, and then they said that once again they'd heard rumors about some kind of persistent side effects that may or may not occur. But when I pushed them on it further, because again this was alarming the second time I've heard it, they said, well, they don't really have any good data on it. and they don't really know anything about it, and they can't really say for certain whether it's true or not. So I said, look, like I've been convinced by online personalities that this was something that they just have to say to protect themselves legally, and so I went ahead and I got the drug.
Right. So for those in the audience who might not be aware, so Hims and Keeps and Roman, and what was the name of the one that prescribed it to
So this
you?
the Canadian Services Maple. They give out antidepressants and they
Mhm.
give out finasteride and maybe Accutane. I'm not certain. At least those two.
Yeah. So these companies are essentially telehealth companies that offer
That's right.
prescription service, yeah, subscription
Maybe with
service
the
to these drugs.
antidepressants, they make you speak to somebody after, but at least something like finasteride is as simple as that.
Yeah. So essentially, the narrative was that this was totally safe, and I think
Yeah,
most
there
people,
was only minor warnings, and it seemed like it was all just as if it was some kind of disclaimer. But like when I spoke to the actual doctor in text exchange, there was no after it was prescribed that okay, this might occur, that might occur. It was just like the type of fine print you'd see.
right,
It was not pushed upon me that these side effects might occur. And even when I went to go see the pharmacist, it was kind of a note in passing. It wasn't, look, this drug is risky. This drug has a strong chance of this and that. It's a very real chance. It was kind of as if they had to say it to legally protect themselves.
right. So what was your experience taking the drug? How long did you take it for, and when
Sure.
did you first notice that something was wrong?
Okay, so I first had my initial time on the drug. This was maybe about a week or a little bit less than that. Anyhow, I took it. Within the first day, really, I started to notice changes to my genitals, mainly in that there was kind of a tension that was there in my pelvic floor that wasn't there before. Eventually, a couple days later, this culminated in testicular ache, which a lot of people on finasteride develop. So I had that, and it was so painful that I decided after maybe 4 or 5 days of usage, I said, I'm definitely going to stop and I stopped. And this first time using it, that went away. What was very odd was that even though that went away, in a couple days later, I started to get a burning sensation in my genitals. Um, sorry, I should clarify. So I stopped taking it. The testicular ache went away. And then I had heard that, okay, I said everything resolved. Maybe I'll try again in the lower dose. So I believe at that time I started my second set on the drug at 0.25 milligrams because I had heard that that's a good way to ease into it, quote unquote. So I began to take it at 0.25 milligrams. And after a few days of using that, that's when the burning sensation in my genitals started to begin. It was very odd. It was basically the skin, and the skin started to change as well. So obviously, I think by the end of the day that started, I started to get erectile dysfunction, and all throughout this time, I had clear semen as well, which is very common in finasteride too. So when these things happen, I said, look, this is not anything that's listed by the FDA as an actual side effect. This is very scary. I'm starting to believe that maybe a post-drug syndrome like post-finasteride syndrome could exist. I'm going to stop using this drug. So I stopped using it. Um, I stopped using it. I believe, yeah, those were the side effects that I had. I also had, right before I stopped using it, my orgasms became incredibly dull. And so I stopped it for a few days. Um, and about a week later, after stopping it, what had happened was I was in the middle of writing an exam for college, and I started to notice sharp pains, stabbing pains in my genitals. So that was really scary. I didn't know what the hell was going on about that. I got home and it got worse, and my genitals started to become very, very cold. And I should note that in that whole week that I hadn't been using it, the visual changes to my genitals did not dissipate. That was still there as well. So after I started to have these cold and stabbing pains now, I really started to freak out. I didn't know what to do. I I was extraordinarily distressed. I thought, oh God, let me just get through this, and then maybe that'll be the end of it. I told my parents that this was happening. I didn't know what to do. we tried to get in contact with the doctor, but the situation for sometimes contacting doctors in Canada is not the quickest. And it was very hard to sleep as well. I started to get super anxious. This was actually something that continued from the drug when I was using it. That was the few cognitive side effects I had was extreme anxiety. I would wake up every 2 hours on some weird loop I didn't understand, but those came back as well. So I was freaking out. I couldn't sleep. The pain was incredible. Luckily, after 3 days, the pain subsided, but what happened was that there was a new numbness in my genitals that took the place of the pain. I had even worse pelvic floor dysfunction than I had when I was on the drug. My anxiety dissipated, at least my sleep came back, but the genital and my orgasms were started to become absolutely terrible, and I started to have minor erectile dysfunction. So that 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 has not went away since it's almost 2 years now. And
Okay.
those only started after I took the drug, those ones in particular. At least the numb genitals, which I have no explanation for. I don't know how this is possible, but it's extremely distinct, and yeah, I don't know what to say about it.
Okay. So, Ethan, why don't you tell the audience about all of the symptoms that you
Yeah,
currently suffer from as a result of having taken finasteride?
absolutely. So my symptoms are mainly only sexual. Um, I have minor erectile dysfunction, so it's a lot harder for me to achieve a full erection. Um, this is in particular positions that this happens, but it does happen very noticeably. I have, which is my main symptom, my main two symptoms, I'd say, is I have numb genitals. This includes the penis and the scrotum. I can't feel tactile sensations on the skin of either of those. It feels as if there's like 20 rubber gloves over my genitals. It's very weird. I can feel pain as if somebody hits you there. So it's like deep, you can feel pain, but the superficial tactile sensations, I cannot feel at all. It's like somebody gave you a shot of anesthetic. Um, I also have my orgasms are completely dysfunctional. They don't make any sense. They're very, very minor. I don't get any kind of contractions in my pelvic floor, and there's nothing that happens in my brain in terms of oxytocin or anything like that. So it's as if there's some sort of wire that's been cut between my genitals and my brain in that kind of way sexually. And also, a lot of the time, every once in a while, I do get pains that come back. They're transient and they're not as bad as when I had it before, but they're still there. But also, very noticeably, my genitals get very cold at certain times, and that's very distressing. The veins protrude as well, as if there's some kind of constriction in the blood vessels going on. I have no explanation for that either. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Ethan, have you visited a clinician? And if so, what exactly happened?
Yeah. So, I immediately took to the internet to research this as much as possible. I spent a lot of time on the Propecia Help forum.
Mhm.
So I thought maybe I could have some sort of remission in my symptoms if I dealt with my pelvic floor in some way. So the first thing I did was I went ahead and I went to go see a doctor, private doctor, and I laid out my case before him. I tried to explain it and defend it as much as possible. I know so many patients are almost ridiculed or they're at least not taken seriously as I was. Um, to this doctor's credit, they did listen, but they did not believe what I was saying. The words I kept hearing were nocebo effect. It's in your head. He said something along the lines of, if you think about this all the time, then it's just as if the problem is not. It's as if the problem's a manifestation of your mind. It's they said that he said that, well, the head of the penis is the thing that feels the most. It's normal that the skin of your penis you can't feel anything. I even very embarrassingly, I was trying to show him on my penis that this was the case, but the doctor did not really believe me at all. And I found this extremely distressing because I put it out in as as much of a scientific and intelligible way, but even that wasn't enough. The doctor simply had never heard of it and even discouraged me in a certain way from going to some sort of pelvic floor professional by saying, look, if they encounter something like this that they feel they can easily explain by saying it's the mind or something that they haven't yet seen in their practice before, they're just going to discredit it and they're not going to believe you, especially since there's not widespread publicity about this condition.
So, can you describe the impact that PFS has had on your life?
Yeah, of course. So before I developed PFS, I was a virgin. I'm still a virgin now, and that's extremely distressing because I'm now 21. It's been 2 years. Um, I go to university. Um, I'd like to be interacting with the girls, but there's always a block in my head saying, even if I do manage to make something happen, what's going to happen when we get sexual? What's going to happen on that front? Because I don't have a penis that's working correctly to do what I would like to do. Um, you add that on to whatever kind of confidence issues people have at this age. I walk around and I feel as though I'm inferior to other guys because I have to deal with this, and that there's essentially something wrong with me because there is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your very talking about this. Obviously, it's a very intimate issue, and it's hard to open up about this. But I really commend you for having done so, so that we can change the situation. I wanted to ask you, Ethan, do you feel like you had enough warning and information about the possible consequences of taking finasteride to provide informed consent?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the fact that there's not that the medical community fails to recognize in a unanimous way that this condition is absolutely real and instead offers conflicting information about how it's something that can be made up in your head. The fact that I go to doctors and that they say that it's all in your head and this is not something that can actually physically be manifested and they don't take it seriously. The fact that there's not enough in the way of trying to actually cure this condition all just shows how the medical community has failed to recognize the real impact this drug has occurred with it being on the market for as many years as it had. There's not enough forewarning at all. There should be absolutely zero tolerance for any doctors to say that this condition is not real. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring as much attention to it so that and so that in a unanimous way doctors can actually see that it is the case. And it's absolutely ridiculous that there's people online, that there's doctors that are not informed of this, that the information has been maligned in such a way that the medical community has just failed these people, including myself.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you so much for coming on, Ethan. I really appreciate your courage and thank you.
Yep.